part of my idea was to base my professional world on live performance. And that was at that time not common among composers. Mostly composers went to schools and they had other people play it, actually. I didn't have that option because no one would play the music at the time. They said they told me that it wasn't ce n'est pas la musique, it's not music. So that eliminated almost everybody else. So then I started an ensemble because there was no other way to play the music. But then that became a focus of the work. For a long time, we weren't even sure that recordings would be possible. Now the technology is quite good, and we record everything. Still, the fact is that a live performance it encourages people to pay attention to the music. Whereas you're home listening to, let's say on the stereo or something, and the phone rings, you'll take the phone, you won't stop. Let the music keep going. Or someone calls, or maybe even a visitor comes. The music just keeps going. And then later on says, oh, did you hear some music? Yeah, you think you did, but you're not really sure you did. In other words, when we go to a concert, it's a dedicated period of time to that activity of listening. And that's the power of live music, that it persuades and encourages us to pay attention to the music. If we don't do it that way, even if you put the music in a film, or it downgrades it to some degree. And yet, that's not entirely true, because there are some things which, where the activities like on the theater or in the dance or in film will actually illuminate the music. That can happen. But anyway, we're just talking about live music. So you heard a live performance last night, and I would say until now, that music has not been heard in Denmark. Even if you had a recording, the chances are you didn't hear it. Well, what's a little confusing is that we recognize that it's not a normal narrative piece. Pieces tell stories, after all. The Tchaikovsky Violin Concerto tells a story. So does the Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, and most it's like that. But there's certain kinds of work which seem to be abstract, and yet, in point of fact, there are also narratives. They're narratives based on a different kind of that have a different basis in the world. At first, when people hear this music, they think it's the same thing over and over and over again, because they haven't learned to hear it yet. Once you learn how to hear it, then you begin to hear that it's actually changing all the time. It's the same way that if you go to a foreign country and the people all look the same to you. Well, they absolutely don't look the same. But to you, and you might have to be there a few months, and then you begin to be able to tell the difference. Look at ants and look at animals, and they see the differences that we don't see. So, in the sense, we call this work not narrative, but that's actually not true. It's a narrative based on a different modality. And to enter into that world can be a radically new experience for people. So that was kind of what was going on last night. And we were aware of that I was aware that almost immediately that almost no one in the room had heard the music before. But to be present in a live performance is a different matter. And I was in Copenhagen maybe 5 years ago. I don't think I played in Denmark before then or since then. So that to hear it, we can wonder what it was like to hear Chopin play the piano, but we don't know. We have no idea. We pretend that we have authentic performances of Bach and Handel, but we actually don't know. However, you can actually hear what I do. I'm here. So it's limited in a certain way. I do maybe 40, 50 concerts a year. I've probably done a couple thousand concerts over the years, maybe more. But actually, it's not very much if you think about it. The music is available. You can hear it on radios, you can hear it in movies and so forth. But the quintessential event happened last night. If you were either there or you weren't, the chances are you weren't. I don't teach anywhere. I had day jobs until I was 42, and then at that point I could make a living playing. So that's, without any question, that's part of it. And it's not easy to do. I leave here, I go home, and 3 days later I go to Tokyo. 7 days later I'm home again. 10 days later I'm back in Austria and Romania. 10 days later I'm home, and then a few days after that I'm in Mexico. It's extremely difficult. I didn't play in the concert halls for a long, long time. I wasn't allowed into concert halls. Again, they said it wasn't music, it didn't belong there. That's in concert halls all the time now. But the premiere of this piece happened to be in Town Hall in New York. That was in 1974. To get to that place, I rented the hall myself. I sold the tickets, and we did the concert. But no one, there was no producer who said, I'm going to present Music in 12 Parts. No one even knew what it was. The curious thing was that for some reason, which I to this day don't understand why, we sold the concert out. It was sold out, every 1,400 people came. Before that, I had been playing from 71 to 74. I was playing every Sunday in what we call a loft, somewhat like the place that we played here, but not quite so big. But these were industrial places that were empty. The people who made clothing or whatever they made had left them. They weren't there anymore. The clothes were being made in Nicaragua or someplace else, or China. So the artists moved into those places in the early 70s, and they were very inexpensive, and they were big. And the pieces were introduced one at a time over a period of 3 years. Every 3 months there was a new piece. And we played them on Sunday afternoons. And if there were 20 people there, we thought that was pretty good. So one of the strangest things is that after doing this for 3 years, I got the idea to do it in a concert hall. Now, why? I thought, if I had never played in front of more than 20 or 30 people. I don't know what made me think that I would be able to find people to hear it. I still don't know how that happened, because I didn't have money to do advertising. We put notices up. We printed little notices and put them up, hung them up on walls and things. People found out about it. People talked about it. There was what we call word of mouth. So that was how it happened, and a lot of people did come. But the first performances were done for very few people. Now again, I wasn't worried about reviews because no critics would come. I was not even worried about other composers because they didn't come either. Basically, I was writing music because I was driven by my curiosity about the language of music and about modes of expression. And I had come from some very, I would say, defining experiences, working with Ravi Shankar, with Indian music, having been in India, having worked with Nadia Boulanger in Paris, and really, it was generally considered at that time, most people thought I had never been to music school and that I was illiterate. Actually, I'd been to music school from the age of 6. I had degrees from Juilliard. I had everything. I had the whole thing. But it was generally, if I took my music to a radio station to show it to someone, maybe someone my age, they would look at it and they would say, well, have you thought of going to music school? I mean, I actually heard that people say that to me, and when I was in my 30s. And so I was so far away from what other people were doing. What you heard tonight, in a way, is a historical moment. What you heard was what we did in 1974. That's 45 years ago. I consider that I didn't apply to any schools to teach. I didn't want to teach. I had decided I would try to make a living writing, and eventually I did. From that time, it took another 12 years before I could make a living actually playing, but that's very common in my country. We call them day jobs. Everybody does that. It's not even unusual at all. In the United States, we don't encourage people to become artists. If you were an artist, musician, composer, poet, usually what you hear from your family is, when are you going to get a real job? Everyone hears that, and you hear it for your whole life. Well, when did I get a real job? I thought I had one. I said, I've got a pretty good job right now. That was my answer, but there was no, the musical politics at the time, I was considered to be not a real musician. I didn't write dodecafonic stereo music. I didn't sound like Stockhausen, wonderful composer, by the way. I didn't sound like Ligeti, wonderful composer. I love that. People thought I hated that music. Why, I don't know, because I didn't sound like it. But actually, one of the reasons I wrote the music I did was because I liked that music so much, and I realized that I couldn't write it. I wasn't going to write that music. What was the point of my being a second-hand Stockhausen? No, there was already a very good one there. There was no need to do it. So if anything, it was the politics of not doing, of not imitating somebody else. There was no need to do it. It already existed. I was looking for a language of music that was I hadn't heard before. And the key to it was the combination of a very disciplined study of counterpoint and harmony and analysis, which I got from music school, but I also really got from Nadia Boulanger from living in France. For more than 2 years, I was just studying. After I had a master's degree from Juilliard, I went back to school and did the whole thing over again. By the time I was 25 or 26, I had been through it, all of it, twice. So when people suggested I go to music school, I just thought it was I thought it was completely ridiculous. I was never angry. I just thought I thought they were idiots. I said, oh, these people, they have no idea. I knew what I knew when they knew nothing. That was my attitude. I felt the same way about people who wrote about music. I didn't care. So I was not involved with the politics. The politics was happening someplace else. That happened so that if you wanted to get what we called a grant or an award, or I got my first musical award when I was 75. I was offered my first teaching job when I was 72. I wrote music all the time. When I was, and I had a day job, I would work at night in fact, what I'm doing here, I work here, I work at night from 12 o'clock around till about 6 or 7 in the morning. This is what I used to do when I was a kid. I do it here because of the time change and this and that, and I don't feel like, and then as soon as the sun comes up at 5:30 here, did you know that? Of course you know that, but I know because I get up and the sun's up. I'm still working. I stop around 6 or 7. I was doing that at the time. I never had any problem working. I would say that every style of music has a performance practice that goes with it. We know that. For example, if you want to play the Scriabin, you play it in a certain way. If you want to play Bach, it's in another way. Being a well-trained musician means that you have acquired those skills. But so how do you play this music? Well, it took years to learn, but that happened quite a while ago. By the time even by 1974, the ensemble had been already together for 6 years by then. And we had developed the ability, for one thing, we're playing instruments that don't require heavy touch. It's very light. It's very like that. Your hand is floating over the keys. When I'm playing almost without any effort. It seems like, because it sounds like it's effort, because it becomes amplified, it becomes mixed and all this stuff. But what we need to do is to overcome the stress of not knowing how to play it, which we overcame a long time ago. So now, after this concert, those guys could actually go out, sit down and play it again. And we don't. We're sitting up having a drink and this and that. No one is actually that tired. If anything, the problem is that you're so excited that you can't sleep. I knew that I wouldn't. I was going to be working anyway all through the night, but I figured I wouldn't be able to do anything serious until about 3 o'clock in the morning. It would take me pretty much 3 hours to come down to a place where my awareness could take in other kinds of things. But the issue is not a physical issue. It's a performance practice. We've learned how to do that, and in the same way, I can say that there's a way to listen to music. Sometimes when people hear it for the first time, they actually can't hear it. I remember when I was very young, seeing the first time I saw an abstract expressionist painting, I couldn't see it. I didn't know what I was looking at. And then after a while, I left the museum, I remember, and I came back the next day very frustrated because I thought I knew something about painting, because I like painting. And I came back and I looked at it and I began to see it. And after a while, I taught myself, like we all do. I learned how to see contemporary art. I learned how to hear contemporary theater. I learned how to understand contemporary poetry. This particular music is particularly, how can I say, it's easy for young people to hear this music. Now, look, I wrote that, the age of the audience is about my age when I wrote it. So when they are interested, I'm not surprised. I saw that. I saw this 40 years ago. And we can play a lot of other kinds of music, but the music of the 70s and the 80s that I did at that time, some of it is from the 60s, 68 or 69 are the earliest ones. Music and Similar Motion, things like that. This is 74, Einstein is 76, so it's all about that time. But Godfrey Reggio Koyaanisqatsi is 81. So that gives you an idea what that time period is. If you were around at that time, it didn't seem so strange. If you were a young person, if you're an older person, they thought it was complete nonsense. There's a reason for that too, which is, it's too much to go into now, but basically this music is based on basically a digital language. It's binary. It's a binary language. It's not. I know that as a fact because I built it myself. That's how it is. I learned to write that way from my work with Ravi Shankar. I'm working in India, working with musicians from Africa. A binary language is more normal, actually, from a global point of view. When we write fugues and sonatas and so forth, and in the classical forms. That's not a binary language. But what I'm writing is a binary language. When people hear it, it sounds like dance music to them. It sounds like something they know. They said, oh, we know what that is, and they like it. But if you don't know that music, if you're the wrong generation, you might say, oh, this is awful. In fact, we used to say the early reviews were very illuminating and extremely funny. One of the first reviews we got, but first, for a long time, no one reviewed at all. They considered this a complete waste of time. And then when they finally heard it, they knew it was a complete waste of time. There is no music school. There's no one in a music school that will tell you this, because they don't know. If you look at the music, you say, oh, it's 2s and 3s, and it's like 1s and 0s. It's binary. It doesn't proceed like a fugue or like a toccata or like a sarabande or like any classical piece. It proceeds the way binary languages proceed. Imitation, extension, variation, repetition. Those are those kinds of strategies. Plus, not in this, but in the later parts of music control parts, I introduced the idea of harmonic changes too. And right after that, I got involved with Einstein on the Beach. So if you think of it that way, this is the last piece I wrote that prepared me to write Einstein. And in a funny way, we're playing it now. We're playing it these days more than we did before. I remember one headline said, "Glass invents new sonic torture." That was the name of the review. That's what he heard. It was a man maybe in his 50s, and there were people in their 30s and people in their 20s. I mean, they thought it was complete nonsense. But it was basically, so when I play this music now, I'm not surprised to see young people. That's what I normally see. Now, if I go to the Opera House to see Akhenaten or to see, I just did a nice piece, the Traum of Kafka that was done in London just last year. It's not that music, it's a different music. And I like that music too. But one of the things that we as a group, we still like to play this music because we know how to play it. It feels good to us. It doesn't make us tired. It makes us happy.